Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the beautiful Austin College campus. My name is Nehal Elramly, and I'm a very proud room mom. I'm also an immigrant, an educator, a professor, an educational diagnostician, and consider myself a lifelong learner. Let's take a quick survey here. Snap your fingers if you have never left the United States before. Okay, so a lot of you did not snap, so most of you have left. Now, how many of you get nervous or scared to try new foods when you're traveling? You'll understand why I asked in a minute. So let's get into it. Once upon a time, that's how all good stories begin, right? There was a 6-year-old little girl getting ready to go to bed for the very last time in the only home she'd ever known. When she woke up the next morning, her mom, and sister would leave Egypt to head to the United States. What was she thinking as she laid her head down that last time? Will I ever have another egg and pastrami sandwich again? Do they even have eggs in America? Yes, my friends. She was worried about finding eggs in America. Good news. They found the eggs. And eventually found pastrami, too. But that wasn't the best part. Coming to America meant trying new foods. Cue the mac and cheese. Macaroni and cheese very quickly became a family favorite and is still my comfort food of choice. So my advice, try that new food. You just might love it. Now, I didn't come here to discuss my favorite foods or how in the grand scheme of things, this shouldn't have been a big deal. But for a 6-year-old, it was. I'm here to discuss the importance of appropriately educating our nation's children, the future leaders of our world. According to the National Center of Education Statistics, in 2021, culturally and linguistically diverse students made up over 10% of U.S. school-age children, or more than 5.3 million students. I can't speak on the entire U.S., but here in Texas, where I live, have raised my children, and have worked in education for over 20 years, our number is over 20%. I raise the question, how are we, as universities and teaching programs, preparing our teachers for this demographic? As I mentioned, I'm a passionate educator, professor, and educational diagnostician. And unless you're familiar with special education, you likely have never heard of a diagnostician before. Basically, I conduct evaluations to determine if a child has an educational disability and a need for special education services. In my current role, I work with families from vastly different backgrounds: economic, social, cultural, linguistic, and education. I've taken this love and passion of special education into the university, and I am currently a professor in the Graduate Diagnostician Program at Sul Ross State University. Let's look at some surprising numbers now. A student must complete 120 college credit hours to earn a bachelor's degree. Follow that up with another 30 to 60 hours for a master's degree, which is where many of our teachers are standing. By the time I finished my bachelor's and master's, I had 2 classes, 6 credit hours that focused on culturally diverse students. But wait, it gets better. To earn a Ph.D., you complete another 60 to 120 hours. Have I lost you yet? Let's do a quick calculation here. In summary, I have about over 220 college credit hours under my belt. Do you know how many of those covered culturally and linguistically diverse students? 6. That's right. I went to a whole lot of college classes, and only 2 ever focused on educating culturally diverse students. And when we see the statistics of how diverse our students are now, that worries me. So whatever happened to that 6-year-old who was scared about never eating eggs again? Well, we came to America and started school. And as any good Egyptian parents would have done, my parents put my sister and I into a private Catholic school. Obviously, we're not Catholic. But my parents believed that a private education meant a good education, and that was their entire reason for immigrating, so their daughters can go to the best schools and have an opportunity at a better life. So, little Muslim girl going to an all-English Catholic school, barely understanding the language, I did what many other English language learners do. I went silent. For about 2 years, I stopped speaking to anyone outside of my family because I was so embarrassed at my limited English abilities. This silent period is not uncommon for English language learners, but understanding this phase in language acquisition is very uncommon. Knowing what I know now, this period would have been cause to have me evaluated for special education. Actually, I'm pretty sure during many stages of my early education, I could have easily qualified as a student with a language impairment or a learning disability. But guess what? I'm not learning disabled. I was just a shy little girl, understanding and learning a new language and culture in the only way my brain knew to keep me safe, through silence, just soaking it all in and absorbing and learning through watching. This experience during those formidable years of my youth drives me each and every day and with each and every child and family I work with. It was the belief that my parents and teachers had in me that led me to be the very first person in my family to earn a doctorate degree. The belief and confidence our teachers have in our students can lead them further than even they could ever imagine. I know it did for me. Today, we will try to answer why this matters. We will discuss how we all have unconscious biases and how these impact students and families in our classrooms. We will discuss with my fellow higher education professionals how our curriculum has changed and how we are aligning that with the current needs of our students. We will discuss the implications of misidentification of disabilities in second language learners and how we can prevent this moving forward. The diversity among us in our society is steadily increasing. This is a direct reflection of a global immersion where cultures and languages intersect more than ever before. This matters because the way we educate our students today has a direct impact on the global order and society of tomorrow. It's time that we embrace the rich cultural tapestry that our students represent. But in order to really appreciate that tapestry, we must first be brave enough to try that new food. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm a proud educator. Just so happens to have personal life experiences closely mimicking those of many of our diverse students. Many a times, these experiences, not always positive, don't stop when you leave the classroom or school building. We experience them in places of business, in our homes, and out in the general public. I'd like to address the big elephant in the room now, unconscious bias. Unconscious bias refers to the attitudes, stereotypes, and beliefs we hold in an unconscious manner. This impacts the way we teach our children just because of the way they sound, they look, or maybe they just dress differently than us. Unconscious bias is something we must all recognize among ourselves. Only when we recognize these biases can we create an equitable learning environment for our students. Honestly, just because someone looks a certain way, speaks with an accent, or dresses different than most means absolutely nothing. In my opinion, being bilingual is one of the bravest things a person can be. It means they took the risk and learned a new language. But when we really sit with ourselves, how do we feel about those families and students walking into our classroom that barely understand English or speak with a very heavy accent? When we identify these biases, it sounds pretty sad, right? My family and I came to the States over 40 years ago. Needless to say, I really don't know much about life outside of the States. And when we do go back to visit Egypt, it is so different than anything we know back here at home. But even now, when I go out, sometimes I'll get spoken to as a recent immigrant. I've heard things like, well, I don't know where you come from, but here we do things like this. when I was interviewing a daycare for my daughter. Or many people not expecting someone that looks like me to work in a higher level position and expect significantly lower success from us. Unconscious bias. It's safe to acknowledge it. Have you experienced this in your personal or professional life? It's time to try that new foods, my friend. Let's move back into the classroom now and talk about how much our education system has changed. Specifically, how ESL programs, or English as a Second Language programs, have evolved. Initially, it was about teaching students English in isolation. But now we understand that a more holistic approach brings about greater success. When we integrate cultural understanding with academic supports, our students have a better opportunity at succeeding. These advancements in understanding and identifying the needs of our students have come a long way. Yet, till now, our teachers have not been fully prepared. They are faced with extra responsibilities and pressures. They're not just classroom teachers. They're cultural ambassadors, language experts, and often the first line of support for our diverse students. Oh, wait, they also have to teach a curriculum to a class of over 20 students, each with unique learning needs. Do we really think that 6 credit hours is enough to prepare our teachers for this dynamic? I can't speak on behalf of educational programs without addressing diagnostician programs as well. My students in the graduate program are faced with very similar challenges as today's classroom teachers, with one extra layer of pressure. Diagnosticians are responsible for assessing and identifying a student with a disability. The weight of identifying a disability in a child is heavy, and that responsibility is not one any of us evaluators ever take lightly. Remember when I mentioned that knowing what I know now, I likely would have been identified with a disability? The misidentification of disabilities among culturally diverse students is a huge concern. Oftentimes, our students are not evaluated appropriately, and their cultural understanding is not taken into consideration. When we misidentify a child, their own belief in themselves and their possibility of advancing in their academics is significantly impacted. I'd like to share a story about a friend of mine with you today. For today, we're going to call him Omar. Omar came to the US after living in a refugee camp for the majority of his youth. Needless to say, the trauma his family endured before being granted asylum to come to the States was incomprehensible. Omar was 8 by the time they came and placed in the 2nd grade. Come spring of his 5th grade year, Omar turned 12. He was older than most of his peers and not making progress as his teachers had expected. Omar's teachers referred him to special education. He was evaluated and identified as a child with an intellectual disability. Omar moved on to middle school and was placed in a class for high-need students. Come 8th grade, when we retested Omar, the entire team was heartbroken. This young man was not intellectually disabled. He just didn't have many English skills. Could this initial misdiagnosed evaluation been prevented? What would Omar's high school years look like had he been evaluated correctly? Unfortunately, by 8th grade, when we retested Omar, he was so significantly behind his peers that he remained in special education as a student with a learning disability. These are the students that keep me up at night, and there are so many others just like Omar. I'm challenging my fellow higher educational professionals. It's time to rise to the occasion. It's time we reassess how we are educating our teachers. How is our curriculum align with what it takes to truly be a well-rounded teacher in a classroom that looks nothing like the classrooms we grew up in? Are we preparing our society for the diversity entering our American classrooms? These are the questions that I raise. It's only when we embrace our students' unique background and belief in their inherent gifts can we create an equitable learning environment. I know many of you will not be teachers or college professors, but you are integral parts of our global society, each of you with your unique gifts and talents. Our future doctors, nurses, HR specialists, business owners, lawyers, psychologists, engineers, and so many more. When we really think about it, our world is so much smaller than any of us could imagine. When we admit our biases and acknowledge, there's no telling how much brighter our future can become. I'm honored and humbled to be standing here with you today, delivering a message of hope for our children, a message of acceptance for our communities, a message of understanding for our immigrants, and a message of camaraderie for my fellow higher education professionals. I stand before you today having been that student in the second grade, too scared and shy to speak. That undergraduate student who was petrified. How was I going to teach an entire classroom? That graduate student curious why some of my courses had nothing to do with the current challenges in education. That diagnostician who was scared I'd be making the wrong call and placing the wrong disability on a child. This matters to me because I've been that student, and I work with these families every day. I thank you for being here with us today, and I hope I've been able to relay my message. It's okay to step back and recognize our own biases. Remember the saying, don't judge a book by its cover? Open that book and allow it to take you across the globe and discover the beautiful riches of diversity. My last challenge for you is this. Don't be scared to try that new food. It might just become your favorite. Thank you.